You close your eyes, and the conversation starts again. Not the one that happened, but the one you wish had happened. Word, pause by pause. You rebuild the entire scene inside your head. This time, you don't hesitate. If any part of this feels familiar to you, you're not alone. And if you ever feel like sharing your experience, the comments are open. It's not about being dramatic. It's not about being broken. It's about the silent weight of living battles that exist only in the theater of your mind. Some rehearsals never make it to the stage, but they drain you all the same. The scene you keep replaying in your head, trying to say everything the right way. You go back to that moment, the room, the light, his tone of voice. Everything is intact in your memory, like a recording that never stops playing. And you start again. You try another entrance, another phrase, another way of arranging the words. This time, you don't freeze. This time, you sound exactly as you should. But the scene never truly ends. It only begins again. You adjust, correct, refine, like an obsessive sculptor facing a stone that is never finished. The real conversation ended hours ago, maybe days ago, but inside, it remains alive. And you keep trying to overcome it. It's not about what happened. It's about what could have happened, about the perfect version you almost achieved, but which remained trapped between your thoughts and your words. Now, it lives only in your head, and you repeat it until you're tired of it, until a new scene arrives, and the cycle begins again, because some battles never leave the rehearsal. They just change stages. The imaginary dialogue that continues even after the day is over. The day is over. You're lying down. The room is quiet, but the conversation hasn't stopped. It continues on its own, as if it has a life of its own. You answer things you didn't say. He says things he never said, but it feels real. It feels necessary. You didn't ask for this to begin. You didn't decide to sit down and imagine, but your mind went back to that moment and constructed a continuation, an extended version, where everything that was trapped finally comes out, where you don't swallow your words, where the truth appears without fear. And the more you engage in dialogue with this invisible person, the harder it becomes to stop, because now you're involved. Now there are arguments, defenses, rebuttals. You feel the tension in your chest, as if the conversation were really happening. But it only exists here, between you and the silence. The body doesn't know the difference. To it, you're reliving it all over again. And when you finally realize it, half an hour has passed, maybe more, and you're exhausted from a conversation that never happened. The alternate version of the conversation where you finally defend yourself. This time it's different. This time you don't stay silent. You don't swallow your answer. You don't smile politely while something inside you twists and turns. In this version, you speak, and every word comes out exactly as it should. You recreate the scene from scratch, but now you're prepared. You know what he's going to say before he says it. You already have the answer ready. You don't stumble. You don't hesitate. You don't get lost. You are firm, clear, unwavering. The version of you that should have appeared in that moment, and for a few seconds, it brings relief. As if correcting the scene in one's head could undo what really happened. As if rehearsing the perfect defense could erase the feeling of having remained silent. But the relief is brief, because outside, nothing has changed. The real conversation remains untouched. The words you didn't say haven't been spoken yet, and the version where you defended yourself exists only here, in an internal theater where you are the only spectator. The silent rehearsal of conflicts that may never happen. You prepare the conversation before it even happens. You craft your arguments, organize your sentences, anticipate every possible reaction. You imagine the entire scenario, what he's going to say, how you're going to respond, where the tension will rise. Everything mapped out, everything calculated, like a strategist before battle, but the battle never comes. Days go by, and nothing happens. The person doesn't even mention the subject. Maybe they're not even thinking about it. Maybe they never have. But you've already lived through the entire conflict. You've felt the adrenaline, the defensiveness, the frustration. You've spent energy on something that hasn't left your mind. And yet, you continue. Because what if it happens? What if he brings it up? You need to be ready. You need to have the right words on the tip of your tongue. So you rehearse one more time. You adjust the details. You prepare answers to questions that may never be asked. The imagined conflict becomes more real than anything that could happen, and you carry its weight, even if it never leaves the rehearsal stage. The mind revisiting old words as if they were still open. Something he said weeks ago comes back, not because you wanted to remember. It simply comes back. A phrase, a tone, a look, and suddenly you're there again, as if no time had passed, as if those words were still fresh, still demanding a response. You know it's over. You know reopening it won't change anything. But the mind doesn't care about logic. It goes back, examines each syllable, searches for hidden meanings. It tries to understand what was behind it, what he really meant, what you should have realized at the time. And the more you revisit it, the more weight the words gain. They begin to grow, to occupy more space than they did before. You add layers. You interpret silences. You create intentions that perhaps never existed, until that simple phrase transforms into something dense, complex, impossible to let go of. But it has already been said. It has already been lived. It is enclosed everywhere, except inside you, where it still pulsates, where it still waits to be resolved. The emotional toll of experiencing situations only in one's thoughts. You didn't leave the house. You didn't confront anyone. You didn't have any difficult conversations. But you're exhausted, as if you spent the whole day in confrontations, explanations, defenses, because in a way, you did. Except it all happened inside, where no one sees, but you feel every second. The mind doesn't spare energy in imaginary scenes. It reacts as if they were real. The heart races, breathing changes, tension rises in the shoulders, neck, and jaw. You experience the situation with your whole body, even if it never left your thoughts, even if no one else is involved besides you. And before you know it, half the day is gone. You were physically present, but truly absent, trapped in a series of situations that only exist in your head, complete conversations, full outcomes, real emotions for unreal events. The exhaustion is legitimate because you lived through it, only alone, in a space where no outcome is possible, but all the wear and tear is real. The feeling of tiredness without having done anything externally. You look back and realize nothing happened. No great conversation. No remarkable event. The day was ordinary, almost empty, but you're drained, as if you ran an emotional marathon that no one else saw, because you did run, only in a place where only you have access. There's no way to explain this to anyone. I'm tired of thinking sounds strange. It sounds weak, but that's exactly it. You spent hours revisiting, rehearsing, rewriting. You lived versions of conversations that never happened. You felt anger, sadness, relief, frustration, all real, all intense, all inside. And when someone asks how your day was, you don't know what to say. Because outwardly, nothing happened. But inwardly, you weathered storms. You faced conflicts. You solved problems that only existed in your mind. And now you're here, exhausted from invisible battles. The body registers everything. It doesn't distinguish between what was experienced outside and what was experienced inside. For it, tiredness is tiredness, even if no one else understands where it came from. The habit of preparing responses for people who are no longer around. You're still preparing what you're going to say to him, even knowing he's no longer in your life, even knowing the conversation will never happen. But your mind hasn't given up. It keeps putting together arguments, organizing sentences, constructing the perfect defense, as if he were still around, as if there were still a chance. It's not about wanting him back. Sometimes it's not even about him. It's about the need to close something that was left open, to say what was trapped inside, even if it's just to the void, even if it's just so you can hear your own words finally arranged the right way. And meanwhile, you spend time with someone who's already left, who's moved on, who maybe doesn't even remember the details you still carry with you, but inside, they remain present. Not as a person, as a silent audience for a speech that will never be delivered, until one day you realize it. You're having entire conversations with ghosts, people who are no longer part of your reality, but who still occupy space in your internal theater. The difficulty of turning off the internal movie before going to sleep. The light goes out. The room falls silent. The body is ready to rest. But the mind conjures up another scene, and then another, and yet another, as if it had waited all day for this moment of silence, to finally project everything that had been kept inside. You try to stop. You try to focus on your breathing, your pillow, the darkness. But the movie keeps playing. A conversation you had this morning comes back edited. A situation that could happen tomorrow begins to unfold. People appear, talk, react, and you're there, trapped in the narrative, trying to control it while it controls you. It's not insomnia. It's something else. It's the inability to turn off the projector, to pause the rehearsal, to simply be present in the void without filling each second with thought. The body wants to sleep, but the mind wants to solve problems, wants to finish, wants to redo until it gets it right. And the more you fight it, the more awake you become. Because now you're thinking about the fact that you're thinking, and the cycle closes, and the night goes on, and you're exhausted, but you can't stop watching. The invisible weight of carrying battles that only exist in the imagination. No one sees what you carry. There are no visible marks, no wounds to point out, but the weight is there, real, constant, made of conversations that never happened, of conflicts you've resolved 1,000 times in your head, of answers that will never be given. All invisible, all heavy. You walk through the day with this silent burden, and from the outside, it seems like everything is fine. You function, you respond, you move on. But inside, there's an exhaustion that has no logical explanation, because you're fighting wars that no one declared, defending yourself against accusations that no one made, preparing for attacks that may never come. And the strangest thing is that you know it's all just in your head. You know you could just let go, but letting go isn't as simple as it seems. Because these imaginary battles serve a purpose. They organize the chaos. They prepare you for the worst. They give the illusion of control until the weight becomes too much, and you realize you're carrying something alone that never needed carrying. That the hardest battles aren't the ones you fight out there. They're the ones you fight every day, silently, against versions of reality that only exist inside. Perhaps you've never stopped to notice this before, but now that it's been said, perhaps it makes sense. These mental rehearsals, these imaginary conversations, this internal theater that never closes the curtains. It's not something wrong. It's not a sign of weakness. It's simply part of how the human mind processes what wasn't said, what remained incomplete, what still pulsates. The truth is simple. You're not alone in this. Millions of people at this very moment are revisiting old conversations, preparing future dialogues, rewriting scenes that have already ended. It's silent, it's invisible, but it's common. And recognizing this is already a first step towards carrying less weight. You don't need to win every battle your mind creates. You don't need to have the perfect answer for every imaginary situation. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply realize that the rehearsal is happening and gently choose to step off the stage. If something here resonated with you, if any of these scenes seemed familiar, consider subscribing, because every week we observe together these silent behaviors that make us human without judgment, just recognition.